All right, Steve. It says you applied for the full-time position with Just One More Record podcast.
Yeah, that's true.
So I got a couple questions for you. My first question for you is, which of the 4 covers of the new Taylor Swift album did you buy?
None of them.
Oh, okay. How many Lizzo records do you have in your collection?
0.0.
All right. Last question. It's 2 parts. What's your favorite record in your collection?
Ooh, that's a good one. Favorite record in my collection. Oh my gosh, I got to remember what records I have. If I put the stuff on Discogs, maybe I would know. I would probably say Bad Religion, No Control.
All right. So imagine this. Your house is on fire. Lindsay's passed out, completely unconscious. That record's sitting there. And then, of course, your cat, Oliver, is laying there. What order do you take them out of the house?
Cat, record, wife.
Excellent. All right. Well, we got a few other candidates, so we'll be in touch.
Okay.
What's up, everybody? This is James coming to you with my guy, Steve Main.
How's it going?
No, not too bad. Obviously, that was a joke. You're going to be our new, full-time host.
Excited about that.
I am, too. That's very, very good news. But we got a third man, kind of like the fifth Beatle, so to speak.
He actually normally is very Beatle-esque in his appearance. A little bit of a beatnik. We're talking about my good friend Stuart McLean from Moonhop Media, and we're coming to you live today from the Moonhop Studios.
So you're starting to make me feel like we're an actual professional podcast and we kind of know what we're doing.
Yeah, I bet people can probably hear that we may sound a little bit better.
Oh, there's no question. We sound a lot better because we have a grown-up that knows what he's doing.
Yeah, with grown-up microphones instead of cheap Amazon podcast, quote-unquote.
I can't believe you called me a grown-up.
Well, there's the one time for everything.
So tell my wife.
All right, buddy. So, this is your second episode. So one of the first things I always like to do is see if there's any interesting music news. So I guess December 6th, Apple announced they will be releasing Apple Sing later this month. That's going to be essentially a karaoke mode for...
I did see something about that.
Yeah.
Just a little blurb online somewhere.
So you're going to load up your Apple Music and you can just karaoke in the car all you want.
I imagine that's going to make for some great TikTok content if you're a TikToker.
Which I am
not.
not.
They call themselves.
I downloaded TikTok twice just because I work with a lot of girls in their 20s and they were all constantly talking about TikTok. And I looked at it and I'm like, I don't even understand what this is.
Yeah, I actually have a TikTok account that my kid created for me, and they made this crazy post. It's a big thing to do on TikTok, I guess, where you ask somebody just 100 different questions, and then you splice it together, and it and just to kind of get their first reaction, I believe is what the purpose of it is. And she made one night when I was imbibing a little bit, and it turned out really, really funny. I think the last check it had something like 10,000 views or something, and a lot of saves, which I guess is the big thing, because you can get a lot of likes and stuff on that, but if you get your TikTok saved, that's when you've hit the big time. And so she actually ended up making a TikTok account for me. I believe it's called Steve is So Dad. I believe is the name for it. So check it out. There's not a whole lot on
Sydney?
there. Yeah, this is Sid.
Let's have her operate our official TikTok because I have no interest in doing that.
Sid would love it. I actually want to bring her on here one day. Talked to Sid about it the other day because Sid's gotten into collecting vinyl. 16 years old and Sid's crazy vinyl.
I do think it would be an interesting perspective because we'd have you, who's been a long-time collector, and what is it like growing up with someone who's a long-time collector?
Yeah. I think Sid would have some great insights just on what the kids think about vinyl today. I mean, Sid's a little different than most kids, which is awesome.
And that's awesome for her.
Yeah. So yeah, you guys will meet Sid one day, probably maybe even next week. Who knows?
We'll see what happens. All right, Steve. are you familiar with R. Kelly and all the hubbub that was going on with him?
No.
So,
Well, somewhat.
So, of course, he's a convicted R&B singer. Long story short, we had talked
He's convicted?
He is convicted.
Okay.
I believe it was, and it's been a while since we covered this, but I want to say it was sex trafficking and wire fraud, so bad stuff. So apparently on December 2nd, he dropped a album called I Admit It on Apple and Spotify, which was promptly removed.
Really?
Yeah, and initially, so it was Legacy Recordings was the label, which is a division of Sony. Sony was resistant to comment on it, but later a rep would say this was an unofficial release or a bootleg.
Okay.
So my understanding from reading from various sources about this, Sony had just straight up dropped him when the time came, but they still own the rights to a lot of his stuff. So this came off of his SoundCloud, and that's how it got on there.
Oh.
So my guess is he probably had somebody put that on there to try to get some money because he's so poor because everyone's suing him.
Gotcha, yeah. Interesting.
That's just a guess. So if you listen to last episode, Steve and I both love Motley Crue. So the Crew announced a box set coming out called the Crucial Crew Box Set. These are studio albums released from 1981 to 1989, containing various color variants. Too Fast for Love, which will be white and black splatter. Shout at the Devil, which will be yellow and black splatter.
They missed that should have been like a total flame job.
Yeah. Theater of Pain, which is going to be hot pink, magenta, and black. Girls, 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 which is going to be cyan blue with black spatter. And then, Steve, there's one left. Dr. Feelgood. What do you think that's going to be?
Ooh. Probably some sort of ugly splatter.
So what I was looking for was, wanted you to say black splatter because it's not. It's a Coke bottle green with oxblood splatter.
Ooh.
I was like, oxblood? That's an oddly specific color.
That is. Yeah, they do make some very oddly specific color names. It's like, it's just red, man. Like,
yeah, I don't care what kind of bovine animal this is mimicked after, unless there's like real oxblood in it. I don't know. Anyway, this box set's going to be releasing February 17th on CD and vinyl, and it's going to be limited to only 10,000 copies worldwide.
wow.
This goes well with the band having announced their 2023 tour dates. On that tour will also feature Def Leppard and Alice Cooper.
Oh, that'd be a heck of a show.
Props to Alice Cooper, man. He's getting up there a bit, and the fact that he still goes out and still tours, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he just played PAC, I believe, last summer.
I think it was shortly after, like, yeah, no, you did, because I thought about getting tickets. But
Yeah, I think Stu actually had tickets. Yeah.
How was it?
I couldn't go.
Ah!
Yeah, I forget the reasoning.
I actually met him. So I want to say it was in the late 90s or early 2000s. He was doing a show up at the Oneida, which is a casino near us. And he was signing autographs at the local haunted house. And this was when vinyl was like dead. And I brought up a copy of Killer, which is the one with the snake on it. Mm-hmm. He put it down in front of him. He looked at me and goes, I haven't seen one of these in years. He signed it. And I was just so awestruck. And then I immediately got shoved along by one of his guys. And he's like, keep it moving. Now, mind you, that record's in terrible condition, but the sleeve looks cool. Whatever. So anyway, back on track here. Backstreet Boy Nick Carter is actually being sued by a woman alleging that he raped her in 2001, stating she was just 17 at the time. And this is the guy whose brother just died, Aaron Carter, another low-level pop celebrity, for like, I think it was a drug overdose in his bathtub or something like that. So not a good time for the Carter family.
Yeah, no doubt.
So have you ever seen Guns N' Roses in concert? That you remember?
I'm sure I have, because I used to go to a lot of the Monsters of Metal shows, and I'm sure they were part of it. And it was probably at Alpine Valley.
I don't doubt that. So apparently, for like the last 30 years, Axl Rose finishes the show by promptly tossing his mic out at the end of the show for a fan to catch. And that's well known. Everybody did it. Apparently, an Australian fan got struck in the face by it. Initially, he had said, if this is true, I'm not going to keep doing this. And then it was found to be true. And he said, in the interest of public safety, I'm not going to do that. So everything I've ever heard about Axl Rose is that pretty much he's an absolute asshole. But I got to say, that's good.
Yeah, props to him.
He handled that right, made a big statement, the whole deal.
Yeah, because I mean, microphones are heavy. Like, if you're not expecting that coming, I mean, look what happened to Harry Styles with the Skittles.
So there's this older woman, and she's not like super duper old, but she's a registration person at my job. Absolutely obsessed with Harry Styles. So she tells me, she's like, they throw crap at him constantly. Bottles. In his Chicago show not that long ago, I think he got struck in the balls by a bottle of something. It's like, why are you throwing crap?
Yeah, what's the point of I mean, I thought crazy party concert goers are supposed to like throw their bras and panties at the people they love. Not
that's because we're old school rock guys, Steve.
That's what it is? Maybe there's like weird dads in the crowd. They're like, "Fuck this guy, take that, Harry Styles." Oh no,
she makes it sound like Harry Styles fans are pretty rabid.
Really, I was watching some stuff with Sid because Sid went to her. Good friend took her to a Harry Styles concert, even though she really wasn't into Harry too much. Now she's obsessed with him, which is
as is most of the world.
Yep. And so they were, they had some nosebleed seats or whatever, but so Sid had showed me some footage of a concert, and I couldn't believe like what, like the things like you say, like the projectiles being thrown, and then there's also this thing.
This isn't a Rocky Horror Picture Show.
Yeah. It's like it was just odd, but there's also a crazy thing that when there, and he's got some song where I think it's like where it's either a song lyric, "Leave America." And
hey, don't let Steve fool you. He's actually a huge Harry Styles fan.
But when he goes and does shows not in America, like his UK fans, wherever he's from,
he's in One Direction. He's from the UK.
They're mad that he plays so many USA shows, and
that's because where all the money is.
So it's because there's a lot more fans, a lot more big cities.
Yeah, but Harry got to get paid.
So it's a big part of the show now. Like, and when he plays this certain song, I have no idea what the name of the song is, but they're like. They shout, like, "Leave America," like the whole arena will be shouting this, and like it's gotten to a point where he almost like sits back and waits for it, and he'll kind of critique them, and he'll give them like thumbs up, or he'll be like, it's kind of like with his facial expression, kind of gives like disapproval, like, "Oh, you could maybe have done a little better," and it's pretty interesting. I when I saw that, I was like, that's just like the power of a rock star, that part doesn't matter what genre of music or whatever, but anybody that can fill an arena, like from back in the day with Kiss or with Rush or any of the big hair metal bands to these crazy pop stars, like that consciousness of the crowd, like there's factors of it that have never changed and probably never will.
Mob mentality. You could even see it back in the day when the Beatles were playing. All those girls screaming and stuff like that. So, kind of getting off subject for a second, one of the things that I learned about Harry Styles is there's actually a good number of songs that he's never put on an album, and he will play them at his shows.
Oh.
And then my coworker, she would record them and she'd play some of them for me. And I'm like, these are actually really good. Like, these are better than any of the stuff that I've heard him play elsewhere. So that leads me to believe that Harry's probably one of those guys who probably does have a measure of musical talent, and he just knows what sells and what people want. He puts that out front. And then when it's concert time, he plays the stuff he likes.
Yeah. One thing that Sid has mentioned to me multiple times is, like, listening to an album, like every song is a different style of music. Like he doesn't like some bands, they may change their musical style like album to album, but like typically an album will kind of a flow. It'll be like, this album,
except for Queen albums,
except for Queen, yeah, they're just kind of that one track mind. Like Beck does it really well. Like he has his album that's like, this is a studio, pump it up kind of, or like jam, kind of a album. And then he's got like a country-esque album, and like his albums are just kind of themed. Everyone's a little bit different. And but from what the little bit I know about Harry, and it's seemingly coming, maybe more than I even want to know.
Same.
That like every song on the album like has like musically nothing to do with the track before or after it. It just
and supposedly his band that he tours with, those are who he writes with.
Oh,
so like 2 of them are married, and then there's another one, and they do everything together. Which is so it's almost like Harry's in a band, but Harry's definitely out front.
Yeah.
So, well, hey, it's what works for them. So, anyway, that's all I got for news, Steve. You said you want to do some talking about 7 inches of something.
Yeah. we talked on my record collection last week, and kind of talked a little bit about 7-inch records, and
right, because we wanted to get to know you as a collector, so people know you're not a poser that just bought your record table last week.
Oh, I'm a poser. I just have an old record table.
Fair enough.
But yeah, just I don't know, just kind of some quick thoughts. I was 7 inches, like my 7-inch collection. It's not a part of my collection that I hit is probably as much as I used to in my youth. Like I remember a good friend of mine that I grew up with, when we'd be getting ready to go out for shows, we would sit and just spin 7-inch after 7-inch after 7-inch, and we'd do that for a half hour, 45 minutes to kind of get us pumped up for the show that we were going to. And it didn't even have to be like just playing this, the 7 inches of the band we were seeing. We just had our favorite, like just getting pumped out to go out. And one of the 7 inches was an old Descendants 7-inch, and I can't remember the name of it. I'll have to get the name of it, and maybe we'll talk about that record in specific, because it's a pretty rare 7-inch. I've tried to find it, and every time I do find it, it's $100 or more.
Steve did call me one time at like 11 o'clock at night, and he was definitely enjoying some beers that evening, and I don't even know if he remembers that conversation or not. He's like, I just love that you're out there living the vinyl life, and you guys are doing what you're doing, and can you check if you ever see this for me?
Oh, that's probably it.
I know it was. I did find it at the time. I don't remember what it was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I still have just such fond memories of just those moments, and that's what 7 inches to me, they just really represent a moment in time, because it's just a quick snapshot of a band. It's not like you're sitting down and listening to an album and kind of get, we just kind of get in the feel of that, like the entirety of an album. It's just a one quick track.
But nobody wants them except for you and me.
Man, yeah, I don't know why.
I like them. I mean, I think at some point I have a fantasy about getting a jukebox and putting them in there.
Yeah, I'd love one of my kind of pet projects in the back of my head that I keep thinking, and I've thought about it for years, and who knows, maybe one of these days soon it'll come to fruition. But I'd love to start either a business or a nonprofit and get an old record press and just work with certain bands that maybe haven't put out a lot of albums on vinyl, just because we're such a Spotify, Apple Music kind of a culture anymore.
I would really love to see our local artist Christopher Gold get some more vinyl out.
Yeah. I've had conversations with Chris a few times on it, and it's just it's a money thing. It just.
Oh no, I get it.
And
vinyl's expensive.
Yeah, because he is a huge vinyl collector as well. I mean,
he's got a YouTube channel, and I know a lot of times he's standing in front of his vinyl collection, and it's massive.
Yeah. He's got just a great eclectic music style, or like his music taste, I should say. I mean, he listens to just anything under the sun. It's interesting to have conversations with him and listen to his stuff. He actually has a podcast as well. Him and his bass player from the New Old Things.
I do. I watch it and listen to it.
Yeah, he's got a great outlook on music. Overall.
I've crossed paths with him many times. Not that I would know that he would remember me specifically, but just a nice guy.
Yeah. But yeah, back to the 7 inches. It's just I would in that record, the record press idea. I would love to just a lot of bands today seem like they release a lot of singles because it just kind of gets them a quick kind of a it gives their fans a quick fix almost, and it just kind of keeps them engaged and relevant and whatnot. And because putting together a studio album, it's expensive.
Mixing and arranging. I think it's not uncommon for a lot of these bands to not even release a physical EP or a physical single, and they just put it on those streaming services.
Yeah.
And I get it, like it's a quick influx of cash. But I think some of those local bands that have more of an intimate relationship with people, I think they would benefit from what you're talking about.
Yeah, and it would just be fun to just go back and re-release those singles. I mean, the 7-inch format would be perfect for that because they're not part of a studio album. They might not even match enough to go on an EP, but just take those singles and just let's press that song this week, or this month. And just do a run of 100 or something, and just have that song. And I think I talked about a little last episode as well. Split 7 inches. I love just the concept of those. It's a great way to discover new music that is like
this band likes this band, so they're going to make a thing together.
Yeah, and then there might be two different genres of music that you might not even like listen to the other genre in theory, but you might be introduced to something like, oh, hey, that kind of changed my mind because it might be just similar enough to the band that you are buying that 7-inch for.
All right. No, 7 inches are a beautiful thing. I think that there's a lot of options. I mean, there's so many kind of jukeboxes. I mean, there's even those because 7 inches were typically 45 speed. There were certain jukeboxes that actually had them at 33 and a half, and they were small. I have an Aretha Franklin one that I got. It was really interesting. So there's a lot of cool things. There's you can get those record players that were sitting on the counters at diners, like at your table and stuff. Just so many odd things to go down if you ever want to do the 7-inch path. So one of the new segments that we wanted to talk about is, I think we all know there's so many iconic bands, and so many of them lost key members. And one of the segments we wanted to do is, let's talk about what would happen if that person hadn't died. So there's people there's the easy ones like John Lennon. What if John Lennon, would the Beatles have gotten back together? There's people unfortunately, a lot of people have died in Wisconsin where we live. Otis Redding, or was that Sam Cooke? One of them got shot in Madison.
Oh, really? I did not know that.
Yeah, the hotel. I might do that one later, so I'm not going to delve too deep into that. Stevie Ray Vaughan.
That's a famous death.
Famous death here. So, but the one I picked today was Cliff Burton of Metallica. Just an absolutely prolific artist. So Cliff was born February 10th, 1962 in Castro Valley, California. He died September 27th, and I'm not even know how to pronounce this right, Dorap, Sweden. So picture this. It was 1986. Metallica is dominating the metal world, or if you really want to be specific, the thrash metal world. And their third album, Master of Puppets, was out. They were touring for it. This album really kind of showcased Cliff's bass skills, elevating his bass work to more of a rhythmic territory, which was generally reserved for guitars. On September 26, 1986, the band was traveling between tour dates after having won the right to choose his bunk via drawing the ace of spades. Cliff Burton relieved guitarist Kirk Hammett of his bunk. So do you know the origin of Ace of Spades card being the death card?
No.
So I didn't, and I knew nothing about it. So I was like, is this the origin? Because, obviously we've had Motorhead, Ace of Spades. So apparently in World War II, the American soldiers would put the Ace of Spades on the dead Germans as a way of mocking them.
Oh, interesting.
So anyway.
And that's World War II, you said? I
think it was World War II.
Yeah, I know in Vietnam era, you see a lot of pictures of the soldiers, and they'd have the Ace of Spades card in their hat and their helmet band, and they just kind of wear it it was like a...
I'm a death bringer.
Yeah.
That kind of a thing.
That type of a deal, yeah.
So Kirk would be quoted as saying, "I'll sleep up front. It'll probably be better anyway." So shortly before 7 a.m., the band was woken by the bus sliding back and forth and eventually rolling on its side. The band would soon discover it was on top of Burton. The bus driver would blame a patch of black ice. The band would express their skepticism over this story. Hatfield said he had walked up and down the road in his socks and underwear, not seeing black ice anywhere. Some stories would claim Burton died instantly. Some would report that he was alive, and then the crane lifting the bus actually dropped back down on him, killing him. That part's kind of mucky from what I was reading. The band had said they did not allow themselves enough time to process the death by driving straight into the bottle. Mm-hmm. And, obviously these guys have had numerous, rehab stints and things like that. So, Steve, what do you think would have happened had he not died?
Oh, gosh. I mean...
And we want to stress this. This is not, we're not definitive. We're not, absolute experts. We can't see the future. This is just our opinion.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, he was such a different energy, I think, than Jason Newsted was. As a
Newsted seemed like an employee.
Kind of, yeah. And I think even I've read or seen some interviews with Newsted after he left the band, and he just he kind of talked about how he wasn't able to kind of get his own art into the band, the machine that was Metallica, and so he sought it in other areas and started a different project. And there was another project that was getting popular, and when he had in some conversation with the band and James Hetfield, I think specifically, Hetfield he just didn't want him to take away of any attention from this machine Metallica, and basically kind of said, yeah, if you're going to do that, you're not going to be in the band. And that's kind of what it seems like was the driving factor of why Newsted left the band, because he was,
I think he had neck issues too.
He wanted to do this project, and Hetfield was kind of like, nope, you're not going to do that. If you do, you're not going to be in the band. And he was like, well, I'm not going to stifle my artistic outlet.
And
so
props to him, absolutely, for that.
Yeah.
So my understanding of the band was he did a lot of writing. Burton did a lot. Even looking at the album that was released after he died, was it Injustice for All?
I believe so. Yeah.
6 of the 8 songs on there he wrote.
Mm-hmm. I've heard. I tried to look that up because I remember hearing somewhere or having a conversation with somebody in the past where Cliff had basically had enough material that got the band through the Black Album. And I tried to do some research on that before this conversation, and I couldn't find anything specifically on that. So I can't remember if it's something that somebody had just said and it was totally made up, or if there was a bit of truth in that. Because if that's the case, I mean, that's a lot of material for a bass player to have written it, and it's it kind of likens me to Neil Peart of Rush as the drummer. He was their main songwriter, and it's just because typically it's the lead guitarist, the lead singer that does most of the writing. And to see these these members of bands that are typically the backup, the rhythm section that's always
you keep the beat,
and keep
you would know
shut.
You're a drummer.
Yeah, exactly. but to have such a major part in the songwriting come from the back of the band, quote unquote, is it's pretty interesting. There's just not a lot of bands that do that these days, I think.
Right. So what I got out of it was I watched a bunch of videos kind of talking about Cliff as a person and so on. And there's some conflicting things. From what I understand, I did see stuff where they said that even some of the Black Album he had wrote, which is what some people consider to be when Metallica started to sell out.
Yeah.
Which is probably their most popular album still to date at this point. It still sells a sickening amount of money, or copies, and making a ton of money. So there's one camp that will sit there and say that, no, Cliff was the hardest of hardcore. He would have stayed true to thrash metal until the end of the time. Then there are other people who are like, no, he's creative. He would have pushed the band and himself to get stronger and do better and do more. So, I mean, that kind of leads to some things. I don't think he would have probably been as rigid to thrash metal. I mean, you look at the 90s, like Megadeth and all those guys, they were all dying out. Not even Cliff Burton could have stopped that.
Yeah.
So I think like he would have had to grow, or he would have had to have died, musically speaking.
Yeah, that's very true. And he was like, one neat thing I found on YouTube when I was kind of brushing up on my Burton history, so to speak. I found somebody had taken and mixed down some Metallica songs where they take out all the noise, and so you just hear Cliff playing. And one thing I noticed, like, because he was famous for his bass solos, like that was like a part of their show, was like the bass solo, and some of these,
which was unheard of.
Yeah, like nobody was doing that as far as I know. I mean, I don't really know. I was 11 when he died.
Yeah.
But
I was 5.
But one thing that I was shocked about was how simple a lot of those bass lines were in those songs. But it'd just be something that, I can play a little bit of bass, but I'm by no means a bass player or no music theory or anything.
You're probably better than a lot of basses.
And I was like, when I hear them, I was like, oh, I could totally probably even figure that out by ear. It's just that simple of a riff. But then all of a sudden he just like, towards like the end of a certain time signature, he'd throw in these little licks that were like almost angelic. It was like, whoa, where the heck did that come from? And then listening to him play his bass solos, I probably listened to like 6 different live recordings of him, and I mean, he played his bass like a guitar through a lot of it, and it was just amazing to watch him, and to be able to play so simply, but then just to like take those solos and just, I mean, literally soar with them was just, it's just shows you how great of a musician he was. And like, I think that brings up your point about him being so like not one track mind on thrash metal. I think that band probably would have changed a lot.
They might. I think there's a possibility that they could have sold out sooner. Like they could have took Load and Reload. And granted, I think they maybe would have had those albums weren't bad, but maybe the artfulness of them would have went up a notch or two. And they may have been a little bit different. But I don't think that they necessarily would have changed the trajectory for probably most of the 90s and early 2000s. But where Metallica's at right now, I don't think they'd be there with him in the band. I think that Metallica's kind of fallen into this like pocket, and they're in a box, and they don't get out of that box ever. Yeah. They don't do anything new. They got something that works, and they stick with it. So another scenario I could have potentially seen was maybe he would have grown past the band. I mean, a guy that was that creative, that was driving the band that much, he might have left.
That's a good point.
He might have been like, hey, I'm going to go do a solo album. And then shortly after that, no, I'm going to go solo. And that would have just gutted that band, because everyone would have followed him and went with him. Then there's yet another scenario. It's like, early 90s, we had that pretty big Megadeth war, where Metallica and Megadeth, because Dave Mustaine of Megadeth used to be in Metallica, and maybe he would have left. Maybe he would have joined Megadeth.
Yeah, or maybe him and Dave would have just made a whole other band that nobody will ever even think about.
Right. I just, bottom line, end of the day, I do think that he was the driving force. I think he was more creative than anybody gives him credit for. I think we were just starting to see the tip of what he was capable of, and I think it was a big loss. I think him dying was a huge loss to music.
Yeah, I agree.
Anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. Steve, got anything else we got to talk about?
Just like to invite you guys to check us out on some social media on the old Facebook, One More Record Podcast.com. Is there a website?
We do not have a website. We just have the Facebook page, which is it would be listed as just One More Record Podcast, but when you see the URL, it's One More Record Podcast, just because that was a lot of letters to type in.
Yeah.
Right on that homepage, there's a button you can click on that will take you to our Gmail. That Gmail goes right to our phones, so we can absolutely see your messages immediately. We're not a big operation. We don't got people doing our social media. We don't got people answering emails for us. It's us and we're going to respond to you directly.
Yeah, so if there's any certain subjects that you'd like to, maybe learn a little bit more about, we'd love to, to talk about those for you. And just, any feedback.
Right. And we like to teach. We want, this is an important hobby to us. And I'm a firm believer that we got to be inclusive, not exclusive. There's no gatekeeping here. So, and if you hate Steve and you want me to get rid of him, you can send that email in as well.
Let me know sooner than later.
I'm sure he's got other things to do. So, all right, guys, thanks for listening. Make sure to shoot us a review on whatever platform that you are listening to. Unless you hate us, don't leave us a review if you hate us. So, just keep spinning those turntables, and remember, there's always more vinyl.